So I watched Fu Panda 4 yesterday. Now I love the first three movies, and this was one of the movies I missed from last month. But I was really excited to check it out, since I am a big fan of the franchise. So let me start with the positives. I think Jack Black is still great as Poe. I still love the character. It was also nice to come back to this world, because I did love the world in the first three movies. It was just nice to revisit the world, some of the characters. I think that the visuals for an animated movie looks pretty good. I think the accent was decent, but the accent didn't stand out to me like it did in the first three movies. Now, the negatives with this movie is that it doesn't really do anything new with the Kung Fu Panda franchise. And the humor for me didn't really land for me. Like, the first three movies felt like it had a great balance of humor to them. And they were funny, too. And one of the issues I kind of had with the humor in this movie is a lot of low fruit humor, where low hanging fruit humor, where it's like humor that would be made more towards kids. And this movie felt like it was made more towards kids. Like the first three movies felt like you could be an adult and have fun or love those movies, whether you're adult or kid. This movie felt like it was aiming more towards kids, so a lot of the humor in this movie just didn't land for me like the first three did. It just felt like it kind of was dumbed down. And then another negative thing with this movie is that I like the idea of Poe's journey in this movie, where he's trying to choose a successor now, where Master Shin is saying you gotta choose a successor to become the new Dragon Warrior, to become a different type of master. And I like the idea of that. And so he finds this character, Aquafina, who voices this Fox character. You find out later on she's looking for the villain, and she's kind of a thief but has some fighting skills. And they do a scene where they try to show her a scene when they show her backstory, but I had mixed feelings on her character. Like, I didn't hate her character, I didn't love her character, and I am a fan of Aquafina. Like, I loved her in Shang-Chi. I loved her in Crazy Rich Asians. I mean, the only time I didn't really like her was in Renfield, where she played the cop, where I felt like she was just miscast in the role. And I know she voiced one of the animals in the Little Mermaid remake, but she was fine in that. But she sounded like herself, and she pretty much sounds like herself in this. But the character, I didn't feel like I felt invested in her character by the end of the movie. Like, I didn't dislike her character, but I also felt like, because this movie is pretty much trying to pass the torch to have somebody else become the new Dragon Warrior. Which I don't have a problem with that idea, because I think this is supposed to start a new trilogy. But her character, to me, was just kind of meh in this movie for me. I just didn't feel it was mostly attached to it. And another thing about this movie is that it didn't really have an emotional hook. Like, the first three movies to me had a great comedy, but also an emotional hook to the first three movies. This movie, there wasn't really much of an emotional hook to this movie. Like I said, it felt like it was aimed more towards kids. And the whole friendship between her and Poe, because her story is that they become friends. She betrays him when he finds out she's actually looking for the main bad guy. But I didn't really completely buy into a friendship by the end of the movie. And this movie's only an hour and 35 minutes, but it did feel a little rushed at the end there. And when it comes to the villain, I think Viola Davis does a good job voicing the villain, but I also found the villain by the end of the movie to be just kind of forgettable. Like, the villain has a cool power, they can shape into like past villains, which I thought was cool, but the overall like backstory of the villain and the reason, to me, I thought it was forgettable. Like, I love the villains in the first three movies. I thought they were all like cool and unique. But I felt like this movie had the weakest villain by far. Outside of the cool power, I just didn't really care much for the villain. Viola Davis does a great job with the voice. Like, she does give a command and presence with just her voice, because she's just a fantastic actress. But the backstory of the character, and overall the character, was just kind of generic, forgettable villain to me. And this movie did feel was aimed towards kids. Like, it felt toned down. Like, the humor a lot of the humor just did not land for me. Like, the humor in the first two movies felt funny. This felt like it was aimed towards more kids, like I said. So, like, the first two movies felt like you could really enjoy them or love them as an adult or a kid. It felt like the humor in this movie was really dumbed down. Like I said, it felt rushed towards the end. And one of the other big issues I have with this movie, too, is that they've been back the main villains for the original three movies. Now the main villain from the second movie and the main villain from the third movie, they only show up at the very end with no dialogue. So they wasted their characters, but the biggest issue I've had was like Tai Lung, the villain from the original Kung Fu Panda movie, the main bad guy from that movie. I wasn't a fan of just how this character acted in this movie. Like, I just did not buy the direction they took this character in, because it just didn't feel like the way the story direction they take this character in and how this character acts in this movie, especially towards the end. I was like, I don't buy this with the character, who the character was in the original movie as the main bad guy. It just, like, I wasn't, and also it just felt like they underutilized his character. Like, if you're gonna bring back one of these villains, if you're gonna bring back all three of the main villains from the original trilogy, and basically the ones from the second third one is gonna be cameos with no dialogue towards the end. But especially with Tai Lung, who's the first bad guy of the franchise in the original movie, like, he to me was underutilized. I really didn't like the dressing they took the character in. It just did not feel like the character from the first movie. And then another big issue I had is that the Furious Five, the weapons at the beginning, but they only show up at the very end in like a training sequence with no dialogue, training Aquafina's character, that Fox character. And to me, I thought this sucked, because I understand why they did it. They referenced at the beginning and the opening to Off and On Adventures, but since I didn't really love the Fox character, Aquafina's character, and I was kind of just, I don't know, it just, to me, that character wasn't a great substitute for the Furious Five characters that I loved. And I also think that you could have just done this whole story of just having the Furious Five, having one of them be chosen to be the Dragon Warrior, since we spent time with those characters in the first three movies. And you love those characters. So that was another thing. I just, like, I get why they want to have the Furious Five be involved in this story in this movie, but it also felt like I was just really missing their characters, and they're a big part of what made those first two movies great. So I just wasn't a fan of them not being really in this movie. But overall, I thought it was a decent movie. You know, there's some decent action in the movie. I still love the world. I still love the Pro character. I love the characters from the first two movies that we were able to see in this movie. And it's a nice looking movie, and I think a lot of kids will enjoy this movie. So it's not as good as that original trilogy. It's not terrible either. Like, I enjoyed it. I had a decent enough time with the movie to recommend it. But it is a step down, and if this is gonna be Star Wars trilogy, I hope they find a better story for the second and third movie, because I love this movie just feeling kind of like I enjoyed it, had a decent time with it, but a little disappointed. So that's my thoughts on Kung Fu Panda 4. Until next time, movie fans.